The waters of the Hiwassee River ran murky that autumn morning, carrying golden leaves that mirrored the color of Galilahi's hair. She walked along the bank with cautious steps, always keeping her head down to avoid the stares that followed her like shadows. Her blue eyes, inherited from a father she had never known, gleamed like fragments of fallen sky among the dark strands she insisted on keeping over her face. The older women of the village whispered when she passed, making gestures with their hands to ward off the bad omens they believed she carried. Since childhood, Galilahi had learned to live on the edges of the Cherokee community, accepted only through the kindness of her grandmother Agidoda, who had raised her after her mother's premature death in childbirth. The village children kept their distance, taught by their parents to fear those different eyes that seemed to see through souls. She had grown up hearing whispers about ancestral curses, about disturbed spirits that inhabited bodies marked by difference. Solitude had become her most faithful companion, and silence her protection. That morning, while collecting medicinal roots for her grandmother, Galilahi didn't notice she was being watched. Oganali, son of Chief Atsadi, had come down to the river to drink water after a long hunt with his brothers. His muscles still ached from the tension of the bow, and the sweat from chasing deer dried slowly on his bronzed skin. When he spotted the young woman kneeling by the water, something in her delicate and focused posture awakened his curiosity. He watched her as she worked, noticing how her skilled fingers distinguished useful plants from poisonous ones, how her movements were precise and respectful with the earth. There was a natural grace in her gestures that contrasted with the sadness she seemed to carry in her curved shoulders. Oganali had never paid attention to the whispered stories about the blue-eyed girl, too busy with his responsibilities as the tribe's future leader. But now, seeing her there so vulnerable and isolated, he felt a pang of something he couldn't name. When Galilahi finally raised her face to drink water, her eyes met his for a brief instant. She startled like a frightened deer, dropping the roots she had collected. Quickly, she lowered her head again and began gathering the scattered plants, her hands trembling slightly. Oganali took a step forward, moved by an impulse to help her. But she had already stood up and was moving away rapidly, disappearing among the trees like a shadow. He stood there, with the strange sensation that something important had just happened, though he didn't know exactly what. The days that followed brought unusual restlessness to Oganali's heart. During councils with his father and the elders, his mind wandered to those blue eyes he had seen by the river. He found himself searching for Galilahi during community activities, watching her from afar as she helped her grandmother with household tasks or collected medicinal plants. There was something in the way she moved, always in the shadows, always avoiding eye contact, that awakened in him an instinctive protection he couldn't explain. Agidoda, Galilahi's grandmother, was one of the most respected women in the tribe for her knowledge of healing plants. Her wisdom was sought by many, but this didn't extend the same acceptance to her granddaughter. People came to her cabin when they needed remedies, but always cast distrustful glances at Galilahi, as if she could contaminate the herbs with her presence. The young woman had learned to become invisible during these visits, working silently in the back of the house, preparing the remedies her grandmother prescribed. Oganali began creating excuses to pass by Agidoda's house. First, he claimed a shoulder pain that bothered him after hunts, then a wound that was slow to heal. Agidoda, with her wisdom of years, quickly realized that the young warrior's visits had nothing to do with health problems. She observed how his eyes searched for Galilahi, how he lingered longer than necessary, perhaps hoping for a glimpse of the granddaughter who kept herself hidden. During one of these visits, Oganali finally managed to see Galilahi working in the herb garden behind the cabin. She was kneeling among the plants, her hands carefully separating dry leaves from fresh ones. The concentration on her face was absolute, and there was a peace in her movements that he had never noticed before. When she became aware of his presence, she didn't flee like the other times. Instead, she remained motionless, as if she had accepted that she would be seen. Her blue eyes met his again, and this time she didn't immediately look away. In that silent moment, Oganali saw beyond the unusual color of her eyes. He saw the intelligence that shone in them, the kindness that had been hidden by years of rejection, the silent strength she had developed to survive in a world that rejected her. He understood that those eyes were not a curse, but rather a mark of something rare and precious, that had been misunderstood for too long. When she finally lowered her head and returned to work, he stood there, knowing that his life had changed forever in that instant of true connection. The subtle change in Ogonali's behavior didn't go unnoticed by the tribe members. His sisters noticed how he became distracted during meals, how his eyes wandered around the village, searching for something or someone. His father, Atsadi, watched with growing concern his son's frequent visits to Agidoda's house. As chief, he knew well the weight of traditions and superstitions that governed his people, and began to suspect that Ogonali's interest might be directed toward the blue-eyed young woman. Galilahi, for her part, felt torn between fear and a strange sensation of hope she dared not name. Ogonali's visits to her grandmother's house had become regular, and she had noticed how he always found a way to see her, even if for just a few seconds. There was a gentleness in his gaze that she had never experienced before, an acceptance that left her both vulnerable and strengthened. She began to dress more carefully, choosing her prettiest dresses and braiding wildflowers in her hair, small gestures of hope she kept secret. One afternoon, while Galilahi was collecting water at the stream near the village, she found Ogonali waiting for her. He had brought a small basket of wild fruits, a simple gesture that carried deep meaning in their culture. She hesitated, knowing that accepting his gift would be a public acknowledgement of his attention, something that could bring serious consequences for both of them. But there was something in the way he looked at her, with genuine respect and admiration, that made her extend her hand and accept the basket. They walked together along the stream bank, maintaining a respectful distance, but enjoying each other's company. Ogonali spoke about his responsibilities as future chief, about the dreams he had for the tribe's future. Galilahi, surprised by her own courage, shared her knowledge about medicinal plants, showing him how to identify the herbs her grandmother used for healing. There was a naturalness in their conversation that contrasted with the tension both felt, knowing they were challenging the community's expectations. When they returned to the village, some curious and disapproving glances followed them. The older women whispered among themselves, pointing to the fruit basket in Galilahi's hands. Ogonali noticed how she hunched her shoulders, as if trying to become invisible again. In that moment, he made a decision that would change the course of their lives. Instead of stepping away, as would be expected, he walked beside her to the door of Agidoda's house, openly defying the community's judgmental stares. It was a small gesture, but one that carried the weight of a declaration. He was not ashamed to be with her. Ogonali's courage in being seen publicly with Galilahi spread through the village like fire across dry prairies. The whispered conversations became open discussions, and the division in the community became evident. Some elders expressed concern about the influence the blue-eyed young woman might have over the future chief. Others, mainly the women who had been healed by remedies prepared by Galilahi, began to question whether their superstitions were fair. The tension grew each day, and Atsadi felt the weight of responsibility to make a decision that could affect the tribe's unity. Agidoda, observing the unfolding events, decided it was time to reveal the truth she had kept for years. On a night when the full moon illuminated her cabin, she called Galilahi for a conversation that would change everything. With a gentle but firm voice, she told her about her mother, Tsula, who had been the beloved daughter of the former chief. Tsula had fallen in love with a blue-eyed trader who passed through the region, and from that love Galilahi had been born. The mother had died in childbirth, taking with her the secrets of a love that had been pure and true, but which the tribe had never accepted. The revelation struck Galilahi like lightning. Finally, she understood why she had always felt different, why she carried a sadness that seemed larger than herself. She wasn't just an outcast without family, she was a chief's granddaughter, descendant of a noble lineage that had been denied to her due to the community's prejudices. Agidoda held her trembling hands and told her that the time had come to claim her place, not because of her blue eyes, but because of the strength and goodness she carried in her heart. It was time to show the tribe that she was not a curse, but rather a bridge between different worlds. Ogonali, meanwhile, faced growing pressure from his father and the elders. Atsadi called him to a private meeting, where he expressed his concerns about the tribe's future and the need to maintain unity. He spoke about ancestral traditions, about the importance of a leader who would be accepted by all, about the risks of dividing the community because of a love that many considered inappropriate. Ogunale listened respectfully, but his heart had already made its choice. He knew that true leadership didn't mean blindly following traditions, but rather having the courage to do what was right, even when it meant facing opposition. The situation reached a breaking point when some of the young warriors, influenced by their families, whispers, began to openly question Ogunale's authority. They argued that a future chief who associated with a cursed one could not protect the tribe from the dangers that would come. Ogunale knew he needed to act quickly before the division became irreversible. He made the decision to call a meeting with all tribe members, where he would finally reveal his feelings for Galilahi and challenge the superstitions that had governed their lives for so long. The great fire in the village center crackled intensely on the night Ogunale summoned the entire tribe for a meeting. The flames danced like restless spirits, casting long shadows over the tense faces of the Cherokee gathered in a circle. Galilahi sat beside her grandmother, feeling the weight of all eyes upon her. Some were curious, others distrustful, but all waited to see what the chief's son had to say. Ogunale rose slowly, his imposing figure silhouetted against the fire, and began to speak with a voice that echoed clarity and determination. He began by telling the story of their tribe, remembering the moments when they had faced adversities and emerged stronger. He spoke about the importance of unity, but also about the need to question traditions that caused unnecessary suffering. His words were carefully chosen, respectful to the elders, but firm in his conviction. When he finally mentioned Galilahi, it wasn't to defend her as a victim, but to recognize her as a woman of value who had been unjustly judged. He described her kindness, her skill with medicinal plants, her silent strength that had inspired in him the desire to be a better leader. Agidoda, feeling it was the right moment, stood up and publicly revealed the truth about Galilahi's lineage. Her trembling but determined voice told about Sula, about the love that had been condemned for its difference, about the granddaughter who had grown up carrying guilt for a crime she had never committed. The revelations caused a surprised murmur among those present. Some elders remembered Sula and how she had been beloved before her passion for the foreigner. The realization that Galilahi was descended from a noble family of the tribe began to change how some viewed her. Atsadi, the chief, found himself in a delicate position. He had known Tsula when young and remembered her kindness and beauty. Looking at Galilahi with new eyes, he could see her mother's features, the same gentleness that had won many hearts in the tribe. But he also saw the pressure from the more conservative elders who argued that accepting Galilahi would mean setting dangerous precedents. The decision he made that night would define not only his son's future, but also the character of the leadership his family represented. The tension in the air was palpable when Ogunale made his final declaration. He said he would choose Galilahi as his companion, regardless of the tribe's approval, but that he preferred to do so with his community's support. He challenged each person present to look beyond superstitions and see the real woman who stood before them. Galilahi, gathering all the courage she had developed through years of isolation, stood up and spoke in public for the first time. Her voice was soft but clear, and she spoke about her love for the tribe, about her desire to serve and heal, about how her difference could be a strength rather than a weakness. The words that came from her lips carried a dignity that many didn't expect to hear. The days following the meeting were marked by a silent but deep division in the village. Some families began to greet Galilahi with respectful nods, while others continued to look away when she passed. Ogunale remained firm in his decision, but could feel the weight of responsibility for leading a divided community. He knew he needed to prove not only that Galilahi was worthy of respect, but also that he himself was capable of uniting the tribe despite differences of opinion. The opportunity for demonstration came when a fever epidemic struck the village. Several children fell ill simultaneously, and traditional remedies were not being effective. The most desperate families, temporarily forgetting their prejudices, sought Agidoda for help. The elderly woman, already frail due to age, needed Galilahi's assistance to prepare the more complex remedies. For the first time, the young woman worked openly, her skilled hands preparing decoctions and poultices while her grandmother guided the process. Galilahi worked tirelessly for 3 days and 3 nights, moving between the houses of the sick like a healing angel. Her blue eyes, once seen as signs of curse, now shone with compassion and determination. She not only prepared the remedies, but also comforted worried mothers, sang soft songs to calm feverish children, and offered words of encouragement to desperate parents. Her presence brought a serenity that perfectly complemented the healing powers of the medicinal plants. Ogunale closely followed Galilahi's work, offering physical and emotional support whenever needed. He carried heavy supplies, helped transport the sick, and coordinated the distribution of remedies. Working side by side, they formed a natural team, each complementing the other's skills. The tribe could see how they supported each other, how their love made them stronger and more effective in their tasks. It was a practical demonstration of how their union could benefit the entire community. When the last patient recovered, a remarkable transformation had occurred in the village. The families who had been healed by Galilahi could no longer see her as a cursed figure. They had witnessed her kindness, her skill, and her dedication. Many mothers approached her with genuine gratitude, offering small gifts and words of appreciation. For the first time in her life, Galilahi experienced the sensation of being truly accepted by the community. She wasn't just tolerated, but valued for her unique contributions. Ogunale's love had been the catalyst, but it was her own merit that won the Cherokee hearts. The union ceremony between Ogunale and Galilahi was marked by a mixture of joy and melancholy that reflected the complex journey they had traveled. Atsadi, finally convinced by Galilahi's character and the leadership his son had demonstrated, blessed the union with solemn words about the importance of embracing differences that strengthen the tribe. Agidoda, with tears in her eyes, could finally see her granddaughter occupy the place she had always deserved, surrounded by the love and respect she had earned through her own virtue. The wedding was performed according to Cherokee traditions, but with adaptations that honored both Galilahi's heritage and her unique position in the community. She wore a traditional dress embroidered with blue threads that matched her eyes, transforming what had once been seen as a curse into a mark of singular beauty. The elders who had initially opposed the union now participated in the ceremony with dignity, recognizing that their old beliefs needed to evolve to accommodate the reality of true love. During the months that followed, Ogunale and Galilahi worked together to heal the divisions that still existed in the tribe. They established new protocols for treating diseases, combining traditional knowledge with Galilahi's innovative observations. She trained young women in the art of medicine, teaching them to see beyond appearances and to value knowledge wherever it was found. Ogunale, in turn, developed a form of leadership that balanced respect for traditions with openness to necessary changes. The couple's happiness was evident to all who saw them together. They walked through the village with serene confidence, their children playing around them with the freedom of those who grew up in an environment of acceptance. Galilahi never again hid her face or looked away when encountering other tribe members. Her blue eyes, which had once been a source of shame, were now seen as a mark of distinction that made her unique and special. But fate reserved a final trial to test the strength of their love and the unity they had built. News arrived that American soldiers were approaching the region with orders to force the relocation of all Cherokee tribes to distant territories. The time of the Trail of Tears had come to their valley, and they would need to face the greatest separation of their lives. Ogunale knew that, as a leader, he would have to make impossible decisions about his people's future, while Galilahi prepared to use all her skills to keep the tribe united during the dark times that approached. The American war drums echoed through the mountains like a storm's harbinger, and Ogunale gathered the Cherokee warriors in a final attempt at resistance. He knew that fighting meant certain death for many, but he also knew that surrender would lead to the slow destruction of everything they loved. Galilahi, pregnant with their first child, worked tirelessly to prepare medical supplies for the wounded who would surely come. Her blue eyes, which had caused so much conflict in the past, now blazed with fierce determination to protect her family and her tribe. The battle was brief but devastating. The Cherokee, outnumbered and outgunned, were forced to surrender after 3 days of unequal combat. Ogonale was gravely wounded in the final confrontation, a musket ball piercing his chest and leaving him unconscious among the bodies of his fallen warriors. Galilahi, ignoring the soldiers who tried to keep her away, ran to the battlefield and found her husband breathing weakly, his blood staining the ancestral earth dark red. For days, she fought against death to save Ogonale, using all the knowledge she had learned from Agidoda and beyond. She remained by his side while the soldiers organized the rest of the tribe for the forced march, refusing to move until he could travel. The American officers, impressed by her dedication and perhaps touched by her unique story, allowed her to remain with her wounded husband. Agidoda, now too frail for the long journey, blessed the couple one last time before departing with the others, knowing she would not see them again. Ogonale awakened when the last echoes of the tribe's footsteps faded in the distant mountains. He and Galilahi were alone in the valley that had been their home, surrounded only by the ghosts of their ancestors and memories of a life that had been. She told him about the forced departure, about how Agidoda had left with tears in her eyes, about how the soldiers had promised they could join the tribe later, when he was healed. But both knew this was a gentle lie. They would never see their people again. In the years that followed, Ogonale and Galilahi lived as the last free Cherokee in that region, raising their children among the ruins of their ancestral village. Her blue eyes, which had been a source of conflict, became a symbol of hope for the children who were born. They represented the possibility of survival even when all seemed lost. Galilahi taught the children the traditions she had learned, while Ogonale told them stories about their people's greatness. They became the living guardians of a culture that had been scattered by the wind, but which continued to live in their hearts. When Galilahi died, at 60 years old, her blue eyes closed for the last time over the land she had learned to love, leaving behind a lineage that would forever carry proof that true love can overcome any prejudice, even when the world around crumbles. If you like this story, leave a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next stories.